Okay, now we'll be starting our next topic, which is exception handling, right? Again, you can perfectly write programs which will work without using exception handling, just like you can write with programs without maybe polymorphism or without inheritance, without templates, which we have seen previously. But you see, the objective is that we not only want to write program, we need to write good programs. Okay, we need to write smart programs, and that is why every programming language has certain features which makes the life of programmer easy. Okay, if you don't use template, you can still write a program, but you will have to rewrite the same function time and again. So you see, you are only writing once, so you are making your life easy. Similarly, ex- exception handling is something which is desirable, right? But if you don't use it, you can still write program, but it will take much more effort. Okay, and presently, as I keep telling you, we are writing much smaller program, but once you will be working on real world projects, okay, the magnitude of those projects would be very very big. So it's always a good idea that you know these concepts, because you will be needing them frequently. Okay, so you see, what is exception handling? First we say what is an exception. Okay, so let's forget about programming. Let's see, okay, in our daily routine, when we use word exception, what do we mean? Okay, so you see, for example, I say there's an exceptional student in the class, so maybe he or she is very good, right? So but you see, an exception can be very good, but it can also be on the negative side, right? For example, if there's a very weak student in the class, that is also an exception. Okay, or maybe we take a quiz, so everyone is scoring 7 8 9 10, 7 8 9 10, and maybe a couple of students, they could not score well, they just get 1 or 2 marks. So that is again an example of exception, right? So you see, anything which is different from rest of the lot is an exception in our daily routine. This is how we generalize it, right? Means something which is very different from rest of the lot. Now that different can be on the positive side, and that difference can be on the negative side as well. Okay, but when you are talking about programming, then exception is not something good. Exception is actually an error. Okay, so in daily routine, exception can be good, exception can be bad, but in programming, exception is always bad, exception is not good. Okay, so we need to avoid it. Okay, now you see, what is exception? As I told you, exception is an error which occurs at runtime. Okay, now what does that mean? You are already familiar with many types of errors. When you are writing a program, if you do not put a semicolon, that is a syntax error or the compiler error. Okay, if you are adding two numbers and you are not getting the correct result, your program is running, then that is an example of logical error. Okay, if you give a function prototype but you do not give the body of the function, that is, then you get something which is called a linker error, right? Now, when we are saying exception, this is also an error, but it is different from all the errors which I have just told you. So an exception is an error which occurs at runtime. What does runtime mean? That your program is running and all of a sudden your program will crash. Okay, you must have experienced it. Okay, that all of a sudden you will see a very scary type of error message. Okay, and all of a sudden your program was running fine, but in between you enter something or you call a function and your program crashes and you have no clue what is actually going on, right? So that is an example of exception, right? All of a sudden your program crashes. So what could be the causes of exception? I am listing few, but there are many others, right? For example, you see, your program has certain memory which has been allocated by the operating system. So it is possible that you run out of memory, right? For example, you are writing a heavy program which requires a lot of memory, but you are using a very old machine. So maybe you can run out of more memory, so your program will crash. Then we have not seen the second one, but just to give you an idea, that suppose you are trying to read data from a file and the file does not exist. So what will happen? You will give name of the file, say abc.text, and the file does not exist. So you see, program will behave strangely. It does not know what to do because the file you are trying to read is not stored on your disk. Then if you are making a calculator, you divide by 0, you see division by 0 is not allowed. It is you can say not defined, so it will give you again an exception, right? Similarly, when you are dealing with arrays, okay, so the size of the array is like 50 and you are trying to access index number 1000 which does not exist, okay, so that can also lead to runtime error. So in short, exception is an error which occurs during the execution of the program, and we want to gracefully handle such a situation. Okay, now you see, the first thing is that you should write the program in such a way that exceptions do not occur, right? But that is a perfect world, that is not possible, because whenever you are writing a program, you will be most likely interacting with the user. You will be asking the user to enter values, okay? So you see, user can enter anything. For example, if you go to if you are filling out a form and it is asking you to enter your GPA, and there you write characters like XYZ, then you see you cannot stop the user. So of course we should make an effort, we should try to make a program in such a way that errors do not occur, but it is not possible. Errors will always occur, exceptions will always occur. So if they have occurred, at least we should be able to resolve it. Okay, so when an exception occurs, the part of the program that handles it is called exception handler. Okay, so this is important, that an exception handler is the part of the program which is handling or which is executing when an exception occurs. And what do we what do we expect from this program? That it should resolve the exception, right? And it should, rather than crashing the program, okay, it should give some error message, meaningful error message to the user. Okay, now let me give you an example. Let me go to the board so that you understand why exception handling is actually important. Okay, that okay, suppose you are filling some online form, registration form for admission, right? And here you have fields like name, you enter something here, okay, and then it asks you, okay, what were your marks or GPA, whatever it is, okay, and so on. There are different fields, and here you have the submit button. Okay, so suppose in the marks you enter this, okay, and when you will click this OK button, every time you do that your program crashes. Okay, or maybe you don't have marks, you are coming from a different background, you have something else. So instead of marks, you don't know what is here, so you say, okay, I don't know, I put this blank, okay, or I put NA, which is like not applicable or something like that. Okay, and every time you are doing it, your program is crashing and it is giving you some, you see, some strange error message which normally you see in the Visual Studio. So you see, for an end user, this will not make any sense. He would not be able to understand why this is crashing again and again. So if the one, you see, when the person will click on this OK button, at the back end there is a function which is called, okay, and this function is actually reading data from these different fields and doing some processing and storing data somewhere, okay, so that we can retrieve it later. So the person who is writing this function, which is executing when you click the OK button, he is responsible for writing the exceptional exception handler. That what if in the name someone enters 123? This is incorrect. Okay, so your program can crash, not always, but sometimes it can crash depending upon how you are dealing with these data. Similarly, in the marks, if someone is giving a blank or NA or some XYZ ABC, and I should make sure that the program should not crash. Okay, so if the user is giving some invalid value, maybe if the user is giving a blank or NA, we want this marks is an integer, so it should get some default value, it should get 0, right? Because 0 is an integer, so you can perfectly store 0 in marks. So if user is not entering anything or entering some garbage values, we should replace it with 0. And we should also give a message to the user, meaningful message, that marks is expected to be a value between 0 and 1000, right? For example, if you are coming from FSC, maybe 1100, I don't know what is the standard today. So you can give a meaningful error message to the user so that user can correct enter a correct value. right? So this is the whole idea of exception handling. Now let's see how to do that. Okay, I'll just maybe I'll be using the board so that we go slow and you see each and every step of how we'll be dealing with exception. Okay, so now we have discussed what is an exception. Exception is an error which occurs at runtime. The first thing we should do is try to avoid such a situation, but it is not possible, right? Sometimes because you are dealing with users, user can enter anything or some unexpected situation can occur. So if you cannot avoid it, at least you should handle it gracefully, and the code that is responsible for handling the exception is called exception handler. Okay, so when we are doing exception handling, there are three new keywords that we'll see. What are these keywords? The first of these is try, the second is catch, and the third is throw. Okay, and I think in almost all the programming languages you will see exactly the same keywords. Okay, we are talking about C++, but you will see the same keywords in other programming languages as well. Okay, so these are three keywords: try, throw, and catch, that you will be using when we are dealing with exception. Okay, and we are writing an exception handler. Okay, now before I give you some example, one thing that you should remember is that throw and catch, how will they work? Okay, suppose there are two persons, one is here and one is here. Okay, this person will throw something and this person will catch it. Okay, for example, if this person is throwing a tennis ball, okay, so this person will catch the same thing. It is not possible that I'm throwing a tennis ball here and by the time it arrives here it becomes a football. Okay, that is not possible. So just take this example. I'll just keep this concept in mind. I'll be referring to it later, that there are two-person, one is throwing something, other is catching something. Okay, so whatever you throw, you catch the same thing. In other words, if I throw an integer, this will catch an integer. If I throw a chocolate, this will catch a chocolate. If I throw a float, this will catch a float. Okay, but of course, when we are writing a program, these will not be maybe persons, maybe these will be something else, right? But the concept would remain the same. Okay, now let's get back and let's start writing something. Okay, suppose you want a program where you are asking the user to enter marks in your quiz. Okay, that you are filling a form, you are taking a survey, and the survey says, okay, what were your marks in the quiz, in the last quiz that you attempted? Okay, now we know that quiz marks are between 0 and 10. Okay, so what if a user enters, I got -5 marks? Or what if a user says, I got 52 marks? So you see, these are illegal values. That quiz marks cannot be less than 0. In our case, quiz marks cannot be greater than 10. Okay, this is what we have defined. Okay, this is our policy. But of course, if you go somewhere else, maybe the policy would be different, but it would be the same idea. Okay, now let me write this in the form of a program. That suppose I write main. Okay, and then I say, okay, suppose we round off the marks, so I'm taking integers as quiz marks. Okay, maybe it can be float, but we are rounding the marks to keep it simple. Okay, now we say ask the user to enter marks. Okay, now this is where problem can occur, right? Because when you say C in, you are giving control to the user. User is going to enter some marks and you don't have any control now, right? User is king. He or she can enter anything that he or she likes. He can even enter this star or comma or semicolon for the marks. Okay, but let's not, since this is the first example, so let's not discuss this. Let's only discuss that we want the quiz marks to be in a specific range between 0 and 10. Okay, so you see, what we'll do, anything in which you risk that there would be some error, you have to put it in a block. Okay, and that block is called a try block. Now what is a block? Block is simply, if I put these brackets, this is a block. Okay, for example, in for loop, in if, in functions, you are using these blocks. Now if I put these brackets and I write try here, now this is a try block. Okay, so when you say block in programming, block is simply a piece of code which is surrounded by these curly brackets. You have seen blocks in if else, you have seen blocks in do while loop or for loop and so on, right? Here we are introducing a new block which is called a try block. You just write the keyword try and then you put these curly brackets, so we are calling it a try block. Okay, now let me go back to the program and let me put this within the program. Okay, so far what we have discussed, any piece of code in which you expect that there can be some error, you surround that code in a try block. So let me write it and then it will make sense. Okay, so I'm making a try block. This is my try block, maybe till here. This is now a try block. Now within the try block, what do? You ask the user to enter values. So you write cin quiz marks. Okay, now this variable quiz marks. Now you have to check whether it contains a legal value or an illegal value. And whenever you are doing that, you will need an if statement. Okay, so you will have an if statement. If, here you will check for error. Now what could be the error? The error could be that if the quiz marks are less than 0, or quiz marks are greater than 10, then this is an error. It means now it user has done something wrong. User has entered an illegal value in this variable quiz marks, which we don't like. Okay, so now if you are, if this if condition is true, it means there is an error, it means there is an exception. And now is the time that you will be using your second keyword, which is throw. Whenever there is an error, you will use the keyword throw. Okay, and how do you know there is an error? You will use the if condition. So if this if condition is true, I know there is an error. Now it's the time to use the keyword throw. Okay, I'll write something here, but just for the for some time, just ignore it. Okay, and suppose there is no error, this if condition would be false, right? Or here I am writing simply C out quiz marks. Okay, now so far what we have done, the statements in which we were expecting that something wrong can happen, some problem can occur, we have surrounded it by a try block, right? Seen was the statement in which user could enter anything, so I have surrounded it by a try block. Then I have to check for error. How do we check for error? We put an if condition, that if quiz marks are less than 0 or quiz marks are greater than 10, then there is some problem. When there is some problem, you use the keyword throw, and after throw, you can write anything. Okay, for example, you can throw an integer, you can throw a float, you can throw in any variable, or it can be an object of a class. Okay, so here we have to decide what we want to throw. So you see, whenever there is an error, for example, you have entered wrong values of quiz -10 or -5. Okay, then we need to give you an error message that the value -5 is illegal. Okay, this is what you see on when you are filling a form. For example, if you are filling out a form, in your marks you write -5. So ideally form should say marks cannot be negative, you have entered -5, so that you know what I am doing wrong. Okay, so after throw, what I will do is i will I can throw any variable. Okay, so in this program I have only one variable quiz marks, so I'll be throwing this integer. And this is containing the illegal value of marks which user has entered. Okay, let me just complete it, and then I understand it may not be very clear to you right now, but when I complete this, then maybe it will make sense. Okay, when your try block is ending at this bracket, here you will start another block which is called catch block. Okay, you write the keyword catch, you put these parentheses. These parentheses are like function arguments. Okay, and here I will write something. For example, here I will write cout. Just be patient, I will explain it. Okay, value of let me just complete it and then I explain. Okay, now you see, just like function argument, a catch block has argument. Okay, and if you remember, what did I tell you? Whatever you throw, you catch it. Okay, so what we were throwing an integer. This is what we were throwing. Okay, so this quiz marks, they will be copied in this m. Okay, now let's first see the sequence and then discuss what will happen. Catch block is responsible for execution when there is an error. First thing you should remember, that this catch block, which I'm highlighting in red, this will execute only if there is an exception. If there is no error, this will never execute, right? Because if there is no error, we don't need to tell the user there is an error. So catch block will only execute when there is an error. And how will it execute? Whenever your program goes to the keyword throw. Okay, whenever your program goes to the keyword throw, from throw it will directly go to the catch block. Okay, because throw is the keyword which is telling that an error has occurred. So there are many things that's why I'm going very slow. I'll repeat it many times, don't worry. The first thing we have seen is that anything in which there can be an exception, you put it in a try block. When your try block ends, there is a catch block. Catch block is only executed when there is an error. If there is no error, catch block is not executed. And how do we know that there is an error? The keyword throw tells us that there is an error. Now with this information, now let's see the sequence, that what will happen. I will dry run this program and we'll see what will happen if there is an error and what will happen if there is no error. Now let's first assume that the user enters something legal. Okay, I'll go line by line, so don't worry. In the first line, we say int quiz marks, we are just reserving 4 bytes. Okay, then we say enter quiz marks. Suppose user enters a value 6. Okay, so this line is executed. Then we check if quiz marks are less than 0 or quiz marks are greater than 10. No, they are not less than 0 because they are 6. They are not greater than 10 because they are 6. So this if condition is false. It means this throw will not be executed. You say cout quiz marks. So on the screen, you see 6 is printed. Then since there was no error, so this catch block will be skipped. Okay, this will not be executed. And after the catch block, if you have something here, like for example, I write cout end, this will be executed. Or if you have some other program, part of the program, that will be executed. Catch block will be skipped because there was no error. Okay, so this is one dry run of the program when the user is entering a correct value, a legal value. Okay, let me do it again. User entered a legal value. The if condition was false because the value is not wrong, the value is correct. The throw part is never executed. Okay, you say cout quiz marks, you see 6 on the screen, and the catch block is also not executed because the catch block is only executed when you throw something. Okay, if you don't throw something, I will not catch anything. Okay, if someone throws, only then it is caught. So this was the dry run if user is entering a legal value. Now let's change this and let's assume now user enters some illegal value. Okay, So again, we execute this program line by line. We declare a variable quiz marks, 4 bytes are reserved. We ask the user to enter value. Suppose user enters value -2. Okay. Now we check the if condition. Quiz marks less than 0, yes, it is -2. So it means now this if condition is true. When this if condition is true, you come to this statement: throw quiz marks. As soon as your program sees the keyword throw, it will skip everything in the try block. From throw, it will directly jump to the catch block, right? Because throw is a red light. Throw is a signal that some problem has occurred, some exception has occurred. So as soon as your program executes the statement throw quiz marks, it will skip this statement. Okay, it means this statement will not be executed. It will directly come to the catch block. Now, as I told you, this the parenthesis you see after catch, this is similar to how things work when you are calling a function. Okay, so this quiz marks is like an argument which is copied in this m. Okay, so what was the value of quiz marks? So this was actually your variable quiz marks. Now you have another variable m which gets the value -2, right? Just like function call, this quiz marks is in m. Now you see, when you are in the catch block, now you know that some error has occurred. So what you will do, you will give an error message to the user that error value of -2 is illegal. Now you see, you are giving this error message to the user so that the user knows that the problem is in this variable. Because in this example, we are only asking user to enter one thing. Maybe we are filling out a form which has name, address, email, and if you just say some error has occurred, then user will not know where the error is, right? So it's always a good idea that when we give an error message, the error message is meaningful so that the user can correct it. Okay, so either you can let the user correct it, or you can give it some default value that once you know that quiz marks user has entered an illegal value, so in the cache block you can say, okay, I'll set it to 0. You can assign 0 to it. Okay, so I understand it's not very easy to follow, but don't worry, I'll repeat it many times. But let me just first repeat the same example on the slides, because that would be neater. So maybe it would be easier for you to understand. Okay, so let me show you the same example and then we discuss. Okay, I think so this, yeah, this is the example that you were looking at. So let me just repeat it and then maybe we can discuss. Okay, yeah, here it is. Okay, so you see we have this quiz marks which user are entering. You can, it's better if you put it in try block, right? But at least the minimum is that the throw statement should always appear in the try block. Okay, so we are asking the user to enter marks, and then we are checking if marks are less than 0 or marks are greater than 50. Then we say throw quiz marks. When your program will come to throw, from throw it will skip everything else, it will directly go to the catch block. This is something important. Okay, that as soon as your program comes at throw, it will directly go to catch block. It means it will skip everything. So again, if the user has entered a correct value, this if condition is false, this is now not executed, this will be executed. Okay, since there was no error, the catch block will not be executed, and then your program will terminate. On the other hand, if the user enters an illegal value, for example say -2, what will happen? This if condition will be true. You will come to this statement throw quiz marks. What will happen? You will directly go to the catch block, you will skip everything else. These quiz marks, they will be copied in this variable marks. Now you know that this is the variable which was causing error. Okay, if because if you have multiple variables, then of course maybe one of those is causing problems, rest are fine. So within the catch block, what we always do, we give a meaningful error message to the user. For example, here we are saying invalid value -2 entered, so that user know where's the problem. And another thing we are doing it, in order to avoid the program from crashing, we are setting quiz marks to a default value, right? Just as I told you in the beginning of the program, that if I don't enter a value, if I enter an illegal value, then maybe we can set it to some default value so that our program continues to work, it does not crash. Or if you do not want it, maybe you can exit the program and you can ask that person to fill the form again. It's your choice that how do you handle that error. So in try block, we put anything which can produce an error. Within the try block, we have a keyword throw. When your program arrives at the keyword throw, it means there is an error. It will skip everything else in the try block. It will directly go to the catch block, and catch block is the part in which you have to give an error message to the user. Right. So this sequence is a bit tricky, but don't worry, we'll see many more examples in tomorrow's session. So I hope by the end of tomorrow's lecture it will become clear. Right. This was the first example. I understand it's not very straightforward to understand in the first look, but we have plenty of examples, so I'm hoping that by tomorrow if you have some confusion they will be clear. Right now we have some time for discussion, so if you have some comments then we can discuss those. Thank you.